Welcome to ViviTalks. I'm Vivienne Aerts. Join me in celebrating 100 talented female musicians from my last album, Typuhthâng, empowering female cacao farmers in Congo's Virunga State Park and restoring the rainforest. Delve into the musical journeys, creative processes, and unique perspectives of these talented women that were involved in the making of this album. Listen to a conversation between British Netherlands-based singer Emma Brown and your host, Vivienne Aerts, as I delve deep into her emotional journey as a remembrance singer for war memorial gatherings, discussing how it led her as far as traveling to Mongolia.
It's working.
Fantastic.
Good to see you.
It's actually my house. And there's a cat who's going to come and screen, and there's a 7-month-old baby. So good luck.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
How are you doing?
I'm fine. I'm so tired. It's unbelievable.
But you're happy and all goes well. How's
Extremely happy. It's
being a mom?
It's like the biggest project of my life, and one for which I felt I was completely unprepared, though I had read stuff and talked to people, but it's really weird. You would never ever let a stranger live rent-free in your house, but that's what you do when you have a baby. I have no idea who he is. I quite like him at the moment. But it's quite terrifying. So yeah, I think it's the biggest improvisation that anyone can do. How are you? How's New York?
I'm good. It's been just so busy. We were in the Netherlands for so shortly, but so every time we've been there, it was like it's just hard to put everything in like 1 week. But yeah, things are good. The album has been well received. The semester ended. Everything goes well. The summer started, so I have a little more time on my hands, and I'm gonna go on tour 3 weeks to to Korea, to Seoul, doing some concerts.
That's
with one.
And just you, or concerts with chocolate?
Well, I'm not sure if we can bring the chocolate because it's just hot. So
yeah,
and they don't really. I don't think there will be chocolate, but we'll bring some, but not as the collaboration. But there is one of the piano players from the album. She lives in Seoul, so she invited me to do some concerts, and I'm sure we'll play my music, and So yeah, she's organizing a bunch, which I'm like super excited.
Have you been to Korea before?
Not yet. No.
I think the food is going to be amazing. We ate in a Korean restaurant in New York.
Mm-hmm.
It was stunning. All the flavors.
The food is really like, there's so much variety too. And I have a lot of Korean friends, and some of them moved back, so we'll meet all of them, and I'm sure they'll show us where to go. Yeah. No, that's good. Yeah. Are you playing a lot? Singing projects?
Yes, quite a lot. My dad died a few weeks ago, which is a really complex story. It wasn't easy, and it wasn't an easy relationship. So I'm not sad in perhaps the normal way of a daughter being sad. I'm more dreading the chaos that he's left behind, especially for my mother. So I was supposed to be going to France today, but the funeral's on Tuesday, and we're going to England on Sunday, which is also why I thought, let's do the interview now, because this is my cat, one of my cats. I thought, let's do the interview now, because otherwise it will be post England and it will just get later and later. So that's kind of, it's really weird because it hasn't cost me any actual effort. I mean, I planned it, but I'm used to planning funerals. It's more this sort of mental, it's hanging over me. And I think after Tuesday, I will feel that I've got a weight off my shoulders. So yeah, there's that. But it's amazing. after the lockdown, so many gigs that were postponed for 2 years came back, and then there's stuff with Remembrance. It's the same date every year for the battle. So pretty much from last summer onwards, I just feel like I've been running.
Wow.
It's almost quite nice to have a baby, to have a break. Like if you want 6 months off, but it's very easy. I mean, you've got 18 years, but you know.
Yeah, it's a commitment. Yeah.
Yeah.
But that's good that you've been busy.
It's nice, and I really love my work. When I started out, I had the ambition, which most classical singers have, of being an opera singer. If you're a soprano in opera, you're doing the lead roles. You have a whole range of roles. I'm a mezzo, so you're almost always playing someone's sister or mother or boyfriend or the witch. So it's theatrically a little bit less interesting, though playing men and witches is interesting. I always wanted to play the Puccini roles of the somewhat screwed up women, because you just want to get into their psychology. So I'd already sort of, the dream of singing opera was already fading away from me when I realized that I was much more of a mezzo contralto than a soprano. And then I had this shoulder accident. I was hit by a car when I was cycling. And then I started focusing on the work that was fulfilling, and the work that's fulfilling is things like singing for veterans, singing for children's foundations, and sort of singing for people who need it. So either because you're fundraising for a good cause, or in the case of veterans, that you're for the Second World War veterans, it's nearly, this year, 79 years since the D-Day landings. So what is happening during the ceremony, they're briefly going back in time to how it was 79 years ago. They're remembering their friends, because the ceremonies are often in the graveyards where their friends are buried. And somehow music has this capacity to bring emotions to the surface. Right. So it's nothing particularly to do with me. Any singer can do this. It's the music and the atmosphere and the setting. And particularly if it's music which was known to them 79 years ago, it sort of brings the ghosts up to the surface. And then you sort of hope that some of the ghosts will actually go away, right, rather than, stay with them and cause them nightmares. And it's very rewarding doing this work. And if I compare that to my dream when I was younger of singing opera, where your public is predominantly quite rich, some of them are genuine opera lovers, some of them are there to be seen. There's big businesses have subscriptions to the opera so they can send potential clients there. You're not necessarily singing for music lovers, and you're not necessarily singing for people who really need music in their lives. So I'm quite actually secretly quite grateful for the injury I had and for not being a soprano, even though both of them have caused me tremendous frustration. Because I feel what I'm doing now is a lot more fulfilling and meaningful.
Yeah, totally. That's so well put. I can totally relate. Art should be available to those who need it, right? Because then that's the purpose of art.
Isn't it weird how art can be elitist? But I don't think any artist's intention is truly to be elitist, unless they've got a phenomenally oversized ego, in which case they're not likely to be successful.
Yep, that's the reality of the world, right? Balancing. Yeah, we need to survive too. We need to just like get the word out. We need to develop that part of like marketing, but at the same time you just want to make a connection, right?
Yeah. And it's the connection specifically through the music.
Right.
I think you're making a connection through the music to the public.
Mm-hmm.
And in that sense, it doesn't matter if you're classical, jazz, whatever. If you're focusing on the connection with your public, it's just the right music for the right public. And I find it very sad when certain forms of music become elitist, even that if that's simply because it's really expensive for people to buy tickets. And it ultimately becomes a status symbol. But there's a therapeutic aspect to music which is overlooked, and also simply enjoyment, escapism.
Yeah, totally.
I really love listening. I ate the chocolate whilst listening to the album because obviously they went together. But I really enjoyed that experience in a time of my life where I have a baby. I'm not having as much sleep as I would like to have. I am overwhelmed by the responsibility of caring for a non-verbal, very vulnerable human being. And whilst I know it's relatively simple, as in you put food in, you clean him, and if you're worried, you check his temperature. Mm-hmm. Still, I'm his mother. I don't expect anyone in the world to care for him as much as me, except his father. So it is stressful. It's very stressful. I'm not qualified to have a baby. And I try to understand him, but of course I don't speak his language. He's a baby. And in the midst of all this, listening to your music and eating chocolates, I had this, period of time where my focus was on your music, on the taste of the chocolate, mm-hmm. and a little bit on the whole project and how we were helping women, helping the environment, very warm feeling. And if that works for me, then hopefully that works for everyone.
That's such a, thank you so much for that. That's so well said. That's exactly what I hope it will do, and it will bring to people, because we can together, we can make a change if we just get back to ourselves and just start with just being nice, being kind, and then share, and then realize that we're here to just share with other people and care for the world.
Precisely. And your project empowering women and being environmentally friendly, that they go hand in hand. And the outcome of that is chocolate. Like, how much better can it be?
Yes.
And music, of course. It's not like all chocolate.
Yeah, and it was not even far out, because the chocolate was for many years was a big part of what I was doing anyway. So it just came together, and it was a quite big project, right? Getting everybody together, and then all the emails, and for these last 2 years, it's been quite extensive. And I'm so proud of what came out of that. And it's even better than I could have ever imagined, because everybody has such a different voice and like a background, and they all recorded in their house and with different microphones and different ways to be able to do it. And it just, it was just a big puzzle, but it just, I'm just so happy with it.
You must have had quite a process editing all this material.
Yeah, it was a lot, but no, it was amazing. And I love working with the computer as well. So I love the production aspect of it as well. And then everything that followed, finding the female mixing engineer, Jess Fenton, and then the master engineer. So that was a lot. And then the production of the book and the story and writing it, making it nice in this with my designer Natalia. She's like, no, it's not going to be a normal CD, it should be a book. Okay, And she's like, we need to screen print the cover. It could be this French fold. And I was like, oh, I found this cacao paper. And yeah, we went just crazy on it. Every little detail we eventually, yeah.
Isn't it lovely when you collaborate with people and they enhance your vision and send it in directions that you never thought it would go? You never imagine it would go this way. I love
all of y'all did it. Yeah. It's been just fantastic. But yeah, let's make this the real podcast. I'll use a bit of this stuff. Obviously, we're gonna
use what you like, and if you don't use me, I'm not offended. I'm here
this is all great. But for editing purposes, let's just do I'll just ask a few questions and we can just fill it in freely. I intend to have the podcast like 30 minutes total. So yeah, it should really be easy.
And if you want me to repeat anything, if you want to send some text for me to read in a chat message, just do it. I'm here to serve you.
Great, so. Awesome. Yeah, because I just, the whole purpose of the podcast is to learn everything about all the faces on the project. And because I figured I made the website with all the biographies and stuff, but it's way more fun to hear everybody's experience in music and in life. And yeah, I mean, obviously one of the goals is like have more visibility for the amazing work that women can do wherever. And yeah, so people can expand their Rolodex.
Yes,
because that's necessary. But yeah, let's start with a semi-formal introduction. So nice of you to be here, Emma. We known each other from Leiden, which is basically our hometown. Even though I'm in New York, I'm oftentimes in Leiden. And you're basically classically trained and you work a lot with remembrance and veterans. And can you tell me a little bit about how you got to be an artist, or how did your evolution as a musician?
I came from that typical middle-class family of high pressure. I was expected to study law or medicine.
Mm.
And my parents paid for me to have piano and clarinet lessons. And the one thing they did not put pressure on was singing. And therefore singing became my passion, because there was no pressure to succeed. There was no pressure to be the best. It was purely for me. And sadly for my parents, that won over medicine, law, or any form of prestige. My dream was to be an opera singer, and part of that dream was being a soprano, because sopranos tend to have the lead roles, and specifically in the operas of Puccini, they're the very interesting roles. As I trained, it became obvious that I was a mezzo. The roles are still interesting, but not quite what I'd hoped for. And then in 2017, I was hit by a car when I was cycling. I tore the ligaments in my shoulder. And in opera, you really have to be able-bodied. So that was an end to that dream, but I still had a classical singing training. I was already working for various NGOs, and I decided to enhance the work that was fulfilling. And the work that for me is fulfilling is singing where I feel I'm, shall I say, needed rather than wanted. Mm-hmm. And that could be fundraising for a children's charity in Vietnam and Mongolia. That could be raising awareness, for example, of the Gurkhas, which are the Nepalese soldiers that fight in the British Army. And it's also with veterans to do with their post-traumatic growth and trauma, that they can experience music in a remembrance ceremony in a graveyard where their friends are buried. And that for me has become the very meaningful aspect of singing. The irony is that had I had the career I'd wanted, I would have probably ended up singing for a public that was largely people like my parents, who were there for status and prestige, which was precisely what I was trying to avoid by choosing singing in the first place. So I'm very happy with the way it's gone.
Yeah, that's amazing. And so throughout the year, you sing in different ceremonies and you travel too, right?
I traveled too. Last year, I was in Mongolia singing for a children's foundation that works with primarily street children. So they may have parents, but for example, they may have a parent in prison or an alcoholic parent. I was in Nepal singing for the Gurkhas, which are the Nepalese soldiers that fight in the British Army, who are terribly underpaid, in my opinion. For Remembrance, there are certain key battles in the First and Second World War which have ceremonies. So you have, for example, the 11th of November, that was the signing of the armistice of the First World War. So there are ceremonies everywhere for the First World War. But you also have, for example, the D-Day landings in Normandy. They were on the 6th of June, 1944. So this year was the 79th anniversary. And every year on the 6th of June in Normandy, there are British, American, Canadian, French ceremonies. And I sing at a range of them. One of the biggest honors I had actually was singing for the First Nations people of the States. For me as a Brit, there are a lot of reasons to be very careful. But to be invited not only to sing for them, but to sing the Star-Spangled Banner, that felt quite meaningful. And I was also quite surprised because I hadn't realized that the First Nations people had played a role in the Battle of Normandy, and quite a big role as well.
Wow, that's so touching.
It is, and I also try very hard not to stick to one side. I sing for the German ceremony in the Netherlands in IJsselstein. That's a ceremony with 32,000 graves. There's a German ceremony in the Netherlands in a graveyard where 32,000 soldiers are buried. And 2 years ago, for the first time, the chief rabbi of the Netherlands was at that ceremony, and he spoke again last year. So you see, I wouldn't call it reconciliation, because I don't believe you can have much reconciliation after a genocide. But you see a step towards trying to come together for the future. And at moments like that, it's actually quite scary to be part of it.
Why is that?
It's humbling at one level, but it's overwhelming. You think that people buried in this cemetery, some of them, probably many of them, worked towards this genocide, worked towards the murder of these 6 million Jews. And I don't know the statistics off by heart, but the Netherlands lost a huge proportion of its Jewish population. You have a chief rabbi there who is also treading carefully not to upset Jews in the Netherlands, but at the same time seeing the importance of working together. And it feels a very delicate situation. Now, of course, it doesn't matter if I sing well or if I sing badly. The delicacy of the situation is not based on my voice or my singing for a moment. And still there is a tension in the air that is not in the air, for example, in a simple British ceremony, the First or Second World War. You feel it. And well, of course, you know with your work with Kenny that when you're singing, there's when you're singing, you want to avoid unnecessary tensions. You're perhaps hypersensitive to the atmosphere around you. You've got to know what to let in and what to try to keep out.
Right. Yeah, it's hard not to let the emotion get part of you and just let the body do what it does best, right? Sometimes it's hard yeah, sometimes it's hard. If you are getting emotional, you still have to control your voice, right?
Of course, and the emotion goes straight to the larynx. So
Yes,
you're trying to use the voice to actually to move people
really,
and to
yeah.
establish an emotion among them. And if you're feeling the emotion yourself, then this will choke, and then you can't deliver what you're trying to deliver. And that can be very hard, especially when you see veterans in their 90s who are crying because they're confronted with the monstrosity of what happened nearly 80 years ago.
Yeah.
You know, I'm there because I've got a job to do, and letting the emotions get to me at one level will prevent me doing my job. And at the same time, if I shut those emotions out and I just go there as a performer, I'm not going to move anyone, because nobody wants to see performance in a graveyard. That's
So
not
yeah.
the context.
Yeah. Do you have a specific moment when you remember your music's had this profound impact on somebody's life?
Many. My husband was in Bosnia after the war. He was part of the civilian efforts to, for example, he was part of the civilian effort to rebury the bodies found in a mass grave in Srebrenica. And as such, he has a NATO medal. What tends to happen is I sing, and the veterans at some point realize that he's my husband. They see the medal and they go to him and they tell him their story, because they're not inclined to tell women anything about the war. And sometimes if I join them, I hear part of this story, and sometimes I'm aware that there's a serious conversation going on. One of the hardest moments was when we were staying in a hotel in the Netherlands with a party of British, American, and Canadian veterans. And one of the veterans at breakfast started telling Ronald about the nightmares he'd had. He'd been one of the liberators of Bergen-Belsen concentration camp. And his carers, who were family members, stood behind him, so he didn't see that they were there. And they heard a little bit of what he was saying, and they walked away. And later we discovered that he'd never told them anything about this. They were aware he'd been in Bergen-Belsen. They were aware he was having recurring nightmares, but they weren't aware of the content of these nightmares. And he had trusted Ronald with this information based on hearing me sing and Ronald being my husband.
Wow.
I'm sorry, I knew you would come in view. Completely messes up your editing.
That's fine. We all love cats. Just for the listeners, there's a cat in the house. Wow. Yeah, and animals feel these things too. But yeah, that's a beautiful story. I'm so glad that he's able to. He was able to verbalize what's happening. Right?
And that's the power of music.
Being able to just verbalize what you're dealing with, that's something that needs to be happening.
I think it's like a stream, and there's clear water to a certain point, but there's mud at the bottom, and then the music shakes up the mud, and then some things might float to the surface and hopefully float away.
Right.
And I don't believe for a moment it's anything special in my voice or my performance. It's simply the power of music and the power of association, because of course one's often singing music that was known to the veterans at the time of the Second World War. So they will have memories from nearly 80 years ago associated with that music.
Yeah. I have a friend who's he's a practitioner in remembrance therapy. Maybe you heard about that.
No.
Yeah, I should totally connect
you.
Yeah, he did all studies. I'll share because that could be very, very, very interesting for you.
It's frightening sometimes.
Because it brings back their old self, right? And then they can finally reconnect with what was actually in their way or happening, or music gets you back to that place.
it does. One of the saddest things I've observed is when veterans cry, they look younger. When they start crying, they easily look 20, 30 years younger.
Right.
It's something has lifted their aging, just maybe the release of crying, I don't know. But it's very strange to see a 90-year-old crying,
Yeah.
and then they look like they're in their late 60s.
Yeah, well, then you've done your job well.
I guess so.
Yeah.
It's much better than singing the bloody St. Matthew Passion, isn't it?
Yeah. Then, how about this one? Have you faced any stereotypes or biases as a female musician? You've been part of this like big women project, so obviously I have to ask that question. And so, yeah, have you faced any of this, and how do you challenge or overcome it?
I don't know how to say this without sounding like I'm showing off, so please edit me.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Biases as a female musician. I read music at the University of Cambridge, which outside of Cambridge would be known as musicology. There was no performance. In my final year, for example, I had to write a fugue in 4 parts with triple invertible counterpoint in 4 hours in a room in silence without a piano. And I was allowed to take a bottle of water and a banana and a pencil sharpener and a rubber into the room. Most conductors have not had this training in not so much musicology as harmony, counterpoint, voice leading, fugue, pastiche. And yet, as a woman, I couldn't possibly know anything technical about music, could I? Because I'm just a woman. And it always intrigues me when conductors, I wouldn't call it mansplaining because they're not always men, but they mostly are men, when they start trying to mansplain music to me, and I just have to bite my tongue because the conductor's training in conservatoire is not the same as a Cambridge music degree. And whilst I can't conduct, I can analyse music at the level of a conductor, if not further. And I'm not in competition with them. I don't care whether they know less or more than me. I just want to have a good performance, but I don't like the power imbalance. And I don't know if that's specifically because I'm a woman or because I'm a singer, and in general, it seems that they don't expect singers to be able to play the piano, let alone read harmony or whatever. But it's quite frustrating. And the other frustration in the classical music world is these games of flirting. I'm never sure if they actually want to get me into bed, or if they simply want to find out that there might be a possibility of it. But I find it tiring and I see right through it. And I've never slept with a conductor. I've never slept with a director. Well, I've never found one attractive enough, to be honest. But also, the idea is if I sleep with a conductor and I get a gig, I'm only going to be secure until he sleeps with the next woman. Well, that's not really security, is it? And yet I sense this, what I call erotic brinkmanship, constantly testing the waters in certain conductors, and it's tiring.
Wow. And even now, since you're married.
Oh, being married with a baby, apparently that makes me even more attractive.
Oh,
presumably,
oh.
Because they assume that there would be no risk of having to commit.
Oh.
I don't know. I don't even want to know what goes on in these men's heads. But no, I had the naive idea that if I was wearing a wedding ring, I would be off the market, but sadly not.
That's a lot of power play, right?
It's just power play. It's pure power play. There is a conductor in the Netherlands who has been accused of misusing women and therefore his power. And the stories about him are quite creepy. It's unclear whether he's done it or not. But the question, of course, is, are these women also abusing their femininity in order to get further? Because if you know that by sleeping with somebody, you are going to get a solo, and you sleep with that person, is that really a power imbalance? But the problem with thinking like this is, I think in the vast majority of cases, it is the man in power abusing the woman who is not in power. But every so often you have a woman who wants to climb the social ladder. I mean, look at Eva Peron. And it all becomes immensely complicated. I dare say I don't regret not sleeping with certain conductors, but I am aware I may have got further if I had. And at the same time, I don't think it was worth the cost.
Yeah. You don't want to just face yourself, right?
No, there's a basic integrity, and there is no security. If this conductor, the stories about this conductor, if they're true, then the only security one would get by sleeping with him is the next gig, until another woman comes along and sleeps with him. And then the first one gets kicked out for the second one. So there's no real security in it. This particular conductor is not very attractive. There are other ones who, for example, work for the Dutch National Opera, who are a little bit more attractive. And still, the security is limited. And also, nobody is going to book you if they know that you slept with a conductor who has this reputation. So you might get your role or your brief period of fame, but it won't be long lasting. And if anything, it will be detrimental in the long term. And yet this really does exist in the industry, and it's really sick.
Do you think it's worse in the music industry than in other fields of business?
I don't know other fields of business. I think it's particularly bad in the music industry because it's often freelancers. So if something like this were to happen in an organization with fixed contracts, then there'd be a very clear hierarchy, and it would be perhaps easier to bring it before a court and before a judge, and it would indeed be easier to judge it. But in the music industry, in an opera, for example, unless you're in German in the Festspiele, it's going to be freelancers sent there through their agents. So the hierarchy is only going to exist for that one production, but not for a longer time. So in that sense, I think the way the music industry is set up makes it worse. But I doubt it's worse in the music industry than in other industries. I think what needs to happen is more women in power, more, in general, more openness about sex, because it's this forbidden topic. And if we were a little bit more open about it, talked about it a bit more, I think if women, for example, shared their experiences, if women warned each other about certain conductors, it would help. And there's also a patriarchal element of trying to hold women in competition with each other, because as long as you put women in competition with each other, you isolate them and then they won't talk. And as women, we have to be bigger and stronger than that, and we have to talk.
Yeah, that's so true. Yeah. Yeah. And I remember that, weren't you writing a play? Because I think you're very adventurous. You work a lot with people in different genres, right? I remember seeing a concert with this band that was unrelated to your field.
Oh yes, I did a rock. I did it. Yeah, cool. Because deep down, everyone wants to be a rock star. Talking of egos.
Hey, well, you did. But you're writing a play. I want to hear about that.
I've written 2 musicals. One is about the pilgrims, because it was the 400 years since the Mayflower. So it was a big project in Leiden. And then there was the lockdown, but also there was Black Lives Matter. And although I've written it very consciously from the perspective of an English family that moved to Leiden, that moved to the States, so it ends when America is viewed from the ship, and then it's actually a retrospective. So it's an old lady looking back on her life. She talks about some regrets with the First Nations people, but it's not. It's more the perspective actually of a white person who is a refugee. And I felt with Black Lives Matter, it wasn't the right time for it. And also it coincided with the lockdown. The other musical I've written is about the liberation of Leiden from the Spanish in 1574, which is a typical example of something which is world famous in Leiden, but unknown to the rest of the planet. Leiden was besieged. They held out for several years. 40% of the population died of plague. And eventually they weren't sure whether to try to fight or to surrender, or simply go through the siege whilst starving with plague. Eventually they chose to sit it out, and they were rescued, and the Spanish disappeared. In other towns such as Alkmaar, it didn't happen, and the Spanish broke through the defenses, rape, murder, pillage, horror. And Leiden took the risk, and the citizens united and decided to take the risk. And I thought it was a great musical. And what I've written is a sort of, in structure, it's a little bit like Les Miserables. You have the stories of individuals, and they sometimes cross paths. In its feeling, it's closer to Spamalot. I'm English, I love Monty Python, and it's a very serious topic. And I do think to make something serious, you also have to have some humor. So we have some politicians who are extremely arrogant and egocentric, and we have one speech that echoes Churchill, because why not, just to show how pompous this man is. And then at the same time you have much more serious moments about starving, and when the whole city is starving, how do you distribute food? Do you give it to the dying because they're the most needy, but they're probably going to die anyway? Those sort of moral dilemmas. So I've tried to balance comic elements with serious elements, and it's tremendously good fun. And I love writing. In conservatoire, you're often encouraged to write in a contemporary style, to try to do something new. And what I love about writing a musical is, of course, it is in my voice. I'm not doing pastiche, but I know that anything I write that's a little bit new or contemporary is within a fixed margin, because it has to be accessible. It has to be enjoyable. The public does not go to see a musical because they want to discover a completely new musical genre. Right. They go to see a musical for an evening of entertainment. So the music should not be so challenging. It dominates and alienates them. And it's very nice to write in a way that serves, even though that flies against all the formal training I've had.
Did you perform it? Is it
no, the Real Virunga King, they want to do it next year. I think they're overly ambitious to put on a musical in slightly more than a year and a half. The plan now is to launch some of it next year, and then to put some production later.
Nice.
It's fun.
In October, I'm sure.
Yes.
Are there any upcoming projects or goals that you're excited about?
Not related to music. I've written a children's book which is being illustrated and published, and it is so nice to do something creative in a slightly different area. There's at one level less pressure because it's not my expertise, so I will feel less judged. The other hand, there's more pressure because I have to research more, have to do more research into what makes a good children's book. It's a picture book, so it's aimed for 3 to 6 year olds to read with an adult. what's amazing is collaborating with an illustrator, because his illustrations then inspire me to edit, which then inspire his illustrations. So you have this beautiful ping pong ball of inspiration going back and forth, which I hadn't expected. And you get that to some extent as a composer. If I write choir music and I hear a choir go in rehearsal, then sometimes I get an input, I change it. But collaborating with an illustrator, just that process of working together is wonderful. And a little bit terrifying, because I have no idea what the finished product will be, because it's a team effort. I think a true team effort is like that. So that's exciting.
So amazing. And what age is the book?
So it's 3 to 6 years old. It's called Maka the monkey. Maka is the word for monkey in one of the Nepalese dialects. It's about a monkey who wants to have lots of friends. He wants to be very famous. And every attempt he makes to do this backfires. And another monkey says, just sit still. And eventually he sits still, and all of a sudden people start making photos of him. They start giving him food. He shares the food with the other monkeys, and he's famous, and he's got lots of friends just by sitting still. So it's a little bit Buddhist, and the proceeds from it will go towards a charity that helps young girls have vocational education. So that's nice. I have some singing gigs coming up, which I'm not allowed to talk about because they're with the Ministry of Defence. Some things I am allowed to talk about. They're reopening the biggest British First World War monument after restoration. That's at Chekhov. It remembers the missing from the Battle of the Somme. There's 72,000 names on it. These are only the missing soldiers, the ones where the bodies were found and identified and remembered in other ways. It's a 3-month battle. 72,000. And that's just British and Commonwealth. They're not French, not German. It's immense. What else do I have? Some beautiful oratorios in England and the Netherlands. A lot of nice things, and the most exciting one I'm not allowed to talk about, which is so annoying. But it's exciting.
Wow, that sounds amazing, and I'm sure we'll find out what else is coming up. I'm going to find you on all the socials. Your website is
ejebrown.com.
ejebrown.com.
Because emmabrown.com, the lady without any clothes on. So couldn't take that one. Don't put that in.
I'll put it all in the description so people can find it. Thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure.
Thank you.
Anyway, so good to talk to you. You probably
I've got a sleeping husband and baby. I should probably crawl in.
Both of them.
Well,
get a couple hours in. No.
If you're in Leiden, do come for tea if you want to. And I also, I'm going to England on a whistle stop tour and not seeing anyone, so I completely understand that if you don't have to.
Yeah. No, next time we should totally do it. Anyway. Have a great night, and
thank you.
Be in touch.
Yeah. Bye.
As I conclude this episode of ViviTalks, I want to express my sincere gratitude for joining me in this musical journey. I hope you enjoyed exploring the stories and experiences of the incredible female musicians on my album. To stay updated on our latest episodes, subscribe to ViviTalks on your favorite podcast platform. Connect with me on social media through Vivienne, and please check out my album Typuhthâng, a musical exchange featuring 100 female musicians to empower female cacao farmers of Virunga State Park in Congo. It's about more than just music. It's about making a positive impact in the world. Your support is part of that journey, so thank you once again for tuning in. Until next time, keep celebrating the power of music, and let's continue to amplify the voices of remarkable women in the industry. Stay inspired, stay empowered, and keep the music flowing. With love and gratitude. Till soon.